Welcome to the Breakup Recovery Podcasts by your host, Barbara Stevens. Discover the wisdom and remarkable insights of Barbara Stevens, breakup recovery mentor, author, and public speaker. Barbara offers programs and solutions for any breakup so you can turn your life around, create lasting changes for the better, and embrace life again.
Hello and welcome to Breakup Recovery Podcast. I'm Barbara Stevens and I'm a breakup recovery mentor. And in this episode, I welcome Stephanie Dalfonzo. Stephanie empowers women to move from anxiety, fear, stress, and distress to finding freedom, peace of mind, and joy in their lives. Now, Stephanie is a speaker, an intuitive women's leadership coach, a yoga teacher, and a certified hypnotist. So welcome, Stephanie. So many things you use to help people.
Thank you, Barbara. I'm so happy to be here because I know that when we're in times of crisis, we really need to have some ways to help us to keep our balance. And that is why you mentioned just a few of the different modalities that I dabble in, because my approach is the more ways that I can help you, the greater chance that I can. If I only know one way, and that doesn't work for you, then I'm failing you. And so, failure is not an option to me.
So I guess, Stephanie, when you're going through a breakup or a separation or a divorce, these emotions of fear and stress and anxiety are a part of people's lives. So what suggestions do you have to the listeners of Breakup Recovery to help them through this difficult process?
Oh boy, I've got so many, Barbara. Where I want to start with is the 3 Ps of pessimism, because a lot of times when we are faced with a crisis or, failing on another word for that, but when we're in these intense situations that we go through at various periods in our life, we have a tendency, many of us, to, go into this pessimistic place, and then people will say, oh, come on, get over it. It's time to move on. And it's not that easy. When you are experiencing grief and anxiety and stress. And, anytime we make a change in our lives, we're going to experience these things. But then when it's a breakup, oh my gosh, that's like one of the biggest things we could deal with. So Martin Seligman, who is from the University of Pennsylvania here in the States, really kind of like the father or grandfather of the positive psychology movement, talked about the 3 Ps of pessimism. So kind of basing it on a quote that I love from Henry Ford, from Ford Motor years and years ago, who said, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. So the 3 Ps of pessimism are about personalization. Okay, do you see this as internal or external, i.e., is it your fault or someone else? And even if you are not the one who instigated the breakup, there's a very good chance that you're going to start going into that part of your brain where you say, well, okay, this wouldn't have happened if only I hadn't, blah, blah, blah. And that really just kind of, keeps you into that loop. So if you can instead just a little pivot, not going from pessimism to optimism, but just make a little bit of pivot to, okay, not everything that happens is because of me. So if I didn't choose this breakup, if I did not be the one to instigate it, it doesn't mean that it was my fault because they chose to break up. So just that little bit of a shift, because I truly believe, Barbara, that it's simple shifts that create lasting changes, right? When you're going through something as traumatic as a breakup, that person, whether it's a well-meaning friend or a relative that's wagging their finger at you saying, oh, come on, get over it and toughen up, that's not helpful. But if you can simply shift it to, okay, you know what, maybe it's not my fault. So the personalization is that first P. The second one is pervasiveness, whether that is going to be a global or specific incident, i.e., is it going to affect every area of my life? And if you sit down and think about that, probably human tendency is to say, well, of course it's going to affect all areas of my life. But then if you really start to deconstruct that and break it down a little bit and start looking at, okay, in the short term, yeah, it's probably going to affect all areas of my life because, I'm a mess, right? So when we learn to start layering in all the different coping skills and the tools and strategies that I teach, then we can start saying, okay, well, it's not affecting me to the point where I can't get out of bed and go to my job, right? So, all right, it's not affecting me in that area. If you're in a breakup and you still have children that you are dealing with, then you find ways to be with your children and try and make the new norm as normal as possible for them. So, okay, it doesn't have to affect negatively in all areas. Yes, there's going to be areas, if you stick with just talking about, you and your children, yes, there are going to be areas where that affects you and your children, but it's not going to affect every area of you and your children. Your children will be able to have happy birthdays. They will be able to go to, whatever fun things are going on in their life. So that's the second P, is pervasiveness. And then the third P is permanence, right? Is it stable or unstable? Is it really going to affect you for the rest of your life? And when you're in those initial stages of the breakup, it feels like that's it. I'm never going to know love again. And yet we all know people who, whether it's through a breakup, through the sudden loss of a partner or whatever, we all know people who really have come back to find a second love, maybe even a happier love, a happier relationship. So these are all, again, simple shifts. The personalization, not everything that happens is because of me. The pervasiveness, it's not going to really, in the long run, affect all areas of my life. And the permanence, it's not really going to affect me for the rest of my life to this extent. Does that make some sense, Barbara?
It sure does. And I guess when you are going through a breakup, you can get caught up in that vicious cycle of only thinking of the negativity, only thinking of the things that are going wrong, and developing anxieties about the future and never thinking that your future will have any positives in it. But you talk about the 3 Ps. How do people actually stop that negative cycle and think about your 3 Ps?
So that is where the coping skills come in, because it's something that, we don't teach children how to deal with their emotions in, healthy ways. Many of us here in the States, I don't know if, down under as well, Barbara, but many of us grew up, if, we're crying, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. So, we're not taught how to deal with our emotions. So then, we deal with stresses and anxieties on a regular basis. And then, whoa, the big wave comes and smashes into us of this breakup, and we don't know what to do. So I truly believe that we can manage our stress, anxiety, overwhelm, all of those emotions if we do it on a daily basis. I'm really into quick and easy techniques, quick and easy coping skills that you can fit into your day so that when life throws you a curveball, you can keep your balance. One of the many hats that I wear is I'm a yoga teacher. And in tree pose, we're not looking for being stick still. We're looking for losing our balance, bringing ourselves back in, losing our balance, bringing ourselves back in. And so with these very quick and easy coping skills, it gives us an opportunity to kind of reel it back in. And at first, very honestly, when you're in the throes of a crisis, you have to work at it. It's not going to come naturally. It's like, it's like brushing our teeth. When we're little, we learn to brush our teeth. Our parents have to remind us every day to brush our teeth, So when I'm working with clients in the initial phase, there's an accountability factor there because we will make a promise to someone else. And of course we'll follow through on that. And yet when it comes to ourselves, we don't always, follow through. So we'll say, all right, I'm going to start using these coping skills. And then we forget. And so we don't make any progress. And then we stay in that pessimism. I had somebody recently, not a breakup that they were in the throes of, but they were in the throes of being unemployed. And they just kept getting, deeper and deeper into the despair. And so we worked on, okay, set a timer on your phone, and once an hour, stop and do one of these techniques so that you can build up that muscle so that, all right, I do this on a regular basis. I'm emptying out, taking off some of that stress and anxiety so that when you do that, you can begin to breathe again.
That's a great tip. Also, starting your day with something positive and finishing your day with something positive can also, I guess, be a skill or a technique that people can use to remind themselves that things can get better.
Well, and I would invite your listeners, if they are not doing this yet, I'm such a big believer in gratitude, because when we're going through crises, it's pretty hard to find gratitude. And yet gratitude can help shift us out of those lower vibrations. So that whether you're in a crisis or not, I really recommend to everyone to do, this is something that I do myself every morning, that before my feet even hit the floor, I will say, thank you, thank you, thank you, and 3 things that I'm grateful for. And when you are in the midst of despair, you think, well, I've got nothing to be thankful for. Did you have a nice, comfortable bed that you slept in overnight? Did you have at least a half-decent night's sleep? Did you remember to brush your teeth before you went to bed? So we're looking for starting with those small things, because once we start exercising, again, that gratitude muscle, all right, 3 things, I can do that. And then maybe adding in at the end of the day, 3 things that I'm grateful for. Wow, if you're drifting off thinking about 3 things you're grateful for, instead of thinking about how angry, how hurt, how much despair you feel over this breakup, I bet you're probably going to sleep a little better.
Exactly. I know that when you're going through a breakup, people tend to worry a lot. So how do you think worry affects people?
In a very not good way. I will, self-profess here. I used to worry like crazy. I think probably you could look up a picture and look up worrywart in the dictionary and you would find a picture of the younger me. And I didn't realize it at the time. I didn't realize at the time that I would worry so much. But when we get into that worry, all right, so in a breakup situation where perhaps we're worried about how this breakup is going to affect us financially. That is a real and valid concern. I'm not trying to minimize that. However, constantly worrying about it is like focusing on exactly what you don't want. And the more that we focus on what we don't want, the more we get what we don't want. I love this quote from Buddha from centuries ago. What you think, you become. What you feel, you attract. What you imagine, you create. So in the context of worry, when we're thinking, oh my gosh, what's going to happen financially? That's not good. What are we feeling? We're feeling really negative. And so part of the quote, what you feel, you attract. You don't want to be attracting more negative vibrations, and what you imagine, you create. So if we're spending our time imagining the worst, imagining that we're never going to find love again, that we're going to be financially ruined, it's almost like we're setting up a sign saying, okay, I'm ready to never have another relationship again. And so I don't mean, please, I hope that your listeners are not taking this as glib, because it's not at all, but it's finding those simple ways to shift out. To begin, really, awareness is like the first spotlight that we can shine to make those changes. So first, becoming aware without judging ourselves for how much time we spend worrying. And I've heard people suggest that, okay, you can dedicate this specific time to worrying and then stop, set a timer. I'm not a big fan of that, because if you, all right, say you set it for 1:00 in the afternoon. What if you're having a really great day and then your timer goes off and you go, oh, time to worry, right? So that's why I'm not a fan of that. But to notice, all right, I'm worrying, then check in with your body. How do I feel in my body? Chances are you're not going to be feeling good. And so then at that point, then you can choose or not to do one of these simple coping skills that I keep mentioning to shift you out of it. And even if it shifts you from how are you feeling this, in the moment, 0 to 10, 0 is not at all, 10 is through the roof. When you check in with yourself on that and you're like, all right, I notice I'm worrying and, how do I feel that in my body? Whoa, that really doesn't feel good. Well, on a 0 to 10 scale, it's about an 8. All right, do one of these quick coping skills. Oh, well, now it's a 3. Notice I didn't say, oh, now it's a 0, right? Let's be realistic here. Even if you take it from an 8 to a 4, you feel 50% better than you did just a moment ago.
Why do you think it's easier to worry about the future that you don't want as to opposed to worrying about the future that you do want or thinking about the future that you do want?
I think it's conditioning. Honestly, Barbara, I think that it's conditioning because, again, I don't know if culturally it's different down under than it is here in the States, but culturally here in the States, even, my gosh, advertising is all about negative stuff. Right? It's, because they're pressing that pain point. You're not going to be happy unless you have this. You're not going to be fulfilled unless you have this. And our pharmaceuticals spend a lot of money on advertising, and it's all focusing on what might happen. So we are conditioned over and over and over again to be focusing on what we don't want instead of, all right, you know what? Acknowledge that this is happening. I'm not saying, stick your head in the sand, but acknowledge what's happening and then begin to make these shifts. It is definitely shifts that help get you there because when you're in this full-blown worry mode to say, okay, now close your eyes and let's focus on what you do want. Chances are, if I did that with a client, they would hang up the phone. They would hang up the Skype, whatever mechanism we were using to have the session. They'd be like, no, that's not going to happen because it's expecting way too much. That kind of change isn't going to happen. And if it does, if somebody says they have a magic wand and they can make you feel better like that, beware because that is not going to be a lasting change. Unless you have the strategies and techniques to sustain the changes and prop you up when life throws you a curveball, you are going to slide right back into your old patterns.
Stephanie, if people want to find out more about what you do and what you offer, where can they find this information?
Thank you, Barbara. They can find me at stephaniedalfonzo.com, and I hope you'll put that in the show notes so they can figure out how to spell it.
I will.
Same on Facebook. Twitter, I think, is S. Dalfonzo. I'm on Instagram. I think I'm just starting to get into Pinterest as well. So, again, if they just Googled my name, if they can figure out how to spell it, they can find me. And, again, I would love, love, love your listeners to go to the number 4 copingskills.com and consider taking that 7-day invitation. Notice we always hear about these 7-day challenges. No, I'd rather gently extend an invitation to you to begin a journey to coming back to who you really are. Because if you are in an extreme state because you were in a breakup recovery period, this is not who you truly are. So I'll invite you to be gentle with yourself and take the next 7 days to play with these simple techniques and then notice how you feel.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you for coming on Breakup Recovery Podcast and sharing information that are practical tips that people can use when they are feeling overwhelmed and stressed. They have a lot of anxiety in their life and a lot of worry. You've given them very practical tips to stop that process and to change it around. So thank you once again for sharing this information.
And thank you so much, Barbara. Thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation with you. And thank you for the mission. Thank you that, you are getting this information out to people who need to hear it.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode number 095, How to Find Ways to Cope with Despair and Stress After a Breakup with Stephanie Dalfonzo. I've decided to split our interview into 2 separate episodes because as I was editing the interview, it became apparent that it was going to be too long and there was way too much valuable information Stephanie was sharing, and I like to keep my episodes around the 20-minute mark. I hope the information Stephanie has shared with you today in this episode has been helpful in some way. I've put Stephanie's website details in the summary of this podcast so you can visit her site and download the 4 coping skills she talked about. Be sure to listen next week to the remainder of my interview with Stephanie, which will be episode number 096, Quick Effective Solutions That Work to Eliminate Stress and Overwhelm After a Breakup, with Stephanie Dalfonzo, Part 2. In this episode, Stephanie guides and takes you through some simple yet effective exercises that will release tension and will help you to feel better, both physically and emotionally. So I hope you will join me for that episode next week. On another note, if you have been listening to previous Breakup Recovery podcast episodes, you know that I'm coming up to my 100th episode soon, and I want to do something special for this 100th episode. I'd love to answer any questions you, the listeners, might have for me, any questions I might not have answered in previous Breakup Recovery podcasts, or maybe you would like me to answer a question more in depth. Maybe I skimmed over an answer, or because of time restraints, I didn't quite give you enough details on this particular subject, or you have a request of a subject you would like me to cover. So there are a couple of ways you can send through your questions or comments, and that would be to go to my website, barbarastevens.com.au, and click on the contact button, or another way would be to go to my Facebook page and hit the message button and do it that way, whatever works best for you. I won't mention your name when I'm reading out your question during the 100th episode if you don't want me to, so be sure to mention that you don't want your name read out in your email or your message to me. I look forward to receiving your questions, your comments, your observations, and recording my 100th episode of Breakup Recovery podcast. And the last thing I'd like to say is, be gentle on yourself. You deserve happiness.
If you would like to hear previous Breakup Recovery podcasts, visit barbarastevens.com.au. Connect with Barbara Stevens on social media with Barbara Stevens Breakup Recovery Mentor on Facebook and at You'll Be Okay on Twitter. Read further blogs, view webinar replays, and download your free ebook, 3 Easy Steps to Surviving Your Breakup, and much more at barbarastevens.com.au.